I'm Connie Reimers-Hild. I'm the Associate Director for the Rural Futures Institute, and presenting with me today is Ptacek. He's the Director for Economic Development for the City of Neligh. Now, throughout the conference, we've heard the message of hope and about the importance of hope for rural communities, people, and places all around the world. And the goal of this conference is to bring new information to light. It's to make connections. It's to meet new people and form relationships that move everybody forward. So what we want to leave with today are some action steps. But what we don't want to see happen today is everybody just leave and then nothing happens. Okay, and I asked this morning too, so I'm going to ask it one more time with this crowd. We have a few more people here than we had at 8 a.m. this morning, which is actually a really good sign. How many of you have met new people at the conference? Raise your hands. Big and proud. Awesome. Woo, good. That's one thing we want to do at the conference. Now, how many of you plan to do something as a result of meeting somebody at the conference? Anybody talk about some new ideas? Awesome, that's great. Even Chuck is like shyly raising his hand. I've never seen that. There you go, that's good. That's more Chuck-like there. So that's exactly what we want to see happen. We want those partnerships to form. We want you to move things forward, but we also want to hear about it. We want to hear those stories and what happens as a result of your work, because those are stories we want to get out and share. But of course, we also realize that not everything we do in the area of rural is all rainbows and unicorns. Okay, we know that. And with me today is a person who really knows the true story and has the experience around a lot of rural development, both good and bad, and who has weathered the storm many times and has come out on top and really helped the city of Neligh and that region grow and prosper in ways I don't know that they would have imagined even just a few years ago. So we are going to talk a little bit about the fact that we realize that it's not all rainbows and unicorns. And Greg is going to lead us in that story. Please welcome Greg to tell a story about rainbows and unicorns.
Throughout the conference, people have known that I was going to be talking, and they came up to me and said, "Hey, are you going to be nervous about talking in front of people?" And I go, "Well, you know, I think I can handle a room of 20 people." So there's a lot more than 20 here, so give yourselves a round of applause for actually sticking around the entire conference. With that being said, you know, transitioning this notion of hope into action, you know, when Connie first talked to me about how are we going to do this, how are we going to talk about this, really started thinking about my own story and my personal story around economic development. I usually tell people that I have the coolest job in the entire world. I get to grow a community for a living, but another word for growth is change, and sometimes people can be very resistant to change. And you know, you talk about failures, and it was amazing to hear the Buffett's actually talking about, you know, failing with $100 million. It just blew my mind. And so in Neligh, we're a town of about 1,600 in northeast Nebraska. And I have been in position for about 2.5 years. The first year we did a lot of just fluff projects and a lot of planning to try to get to a really sustainable future. And in the last 1.5 years, we had some projects that we're going to have to rip off a Band-Aid pretty hard with. And so we had a project that was going to need to be we're going to need to annex some already established businesses. And sometimes people can be fine with change until it actually impacts them, and then they get a little resistant. So with that annexation, the city started moving forward, and we moved forward with this annexation. There was businesses that were a little resistant. They started talking to the city. The city still moved forward with the annexation. This group of business owners then hired a professional mudslinger to come in and try to steer the city's mind and change their mind. The mudslinger then said very not nice things about the entire community, including myself. And the city moved forward with the annexation, and this group then decided to try to recall the entire city council and the mayor, and was actually successful in getting it as a ballot initiative. And so last week, So this is a pretty fresh story in my mind. The citizens of Neligh actually decided to retain the council at a 2-to-1 vote. But there was a lot of hurt feelings, really divided community. And with that, when you start talking about casting that stone into a pond and creating a ripple of hope, it's tough to do that when you know that your ripple might have to hit a barrier. Your ripple might have to, maybe stop or gain or lose momentum. So what I really wanted to talk about was trying to ricochet your ripple. So, you cast that ripple into the stone and it'll hit a wall, it's gonna bounce off. So how do we do that? As rural leaders, you're really going to have to be resilient when you take up and actually answer the call for Hope Inspires Vision. We're gonna have to be resilient. You're gonna have to learn to ricochet that ripple. And you metropolitan leaders, who might be in the city, that might be helping to enact change and foster hope in the rural areas, we really need you to be our cheerleaders. I think you listen to the governor talk, he's an absolutely amazing cheerleader for the entire state, but especially rural Nebraska. And we also need partners, not preachers. So come in and really help us. So now with that, I think Connie and I have some questions to try to really engage that action and get some feedback from you.
That's great. Thank you, Greg. And that is really the point of this session. We do want to create that collective hope, and we want to really make this a movement. So again, not ending after today, but really getting into action and staying in action and growing that momentum is so important. So there are some worksheets on the table. Some of you should have these in your folders. If you still have your folders, just notice we did put extra copies out too, so even if you can't find your folder, there's one for you. All right, so I know how that works. You may have already filled this out this morning. It's the same document that I used this morning. And we have 3 questions that we would like you at your tables to answer as a collective group. Okay, so we want to do some collective brainstorming around this. Because we also know that rainbows and unicorns do exist, right? And rainbows are a sign of hope. Who hasn't looked at a rainbow and just had that hopeful feeling and a wonderful feeling come to you? That happens automatically. And actually, interestingly enough, when Greg and I were talking about this session, I researched unicorns. I'm sure the whole RFI team is wondering what I'm doing in my office looking up pictures of unicorns. But it took a while to find a good one. But also, unicorns, they're a great creature in mythology, and they stand for strength, and they stand for being a maverick and getting things done. And actually, I know it may sound a little bit odd, but I actually think unicorns may be a great symbol for rural communities. I'll run that by the team a little later afterwards. But when we think about unicorns and the fact that people sort of don't totally believe in them, but people kind of maybe do as well, that's how I sort of view the future of rural. A lot of people may not believe that the future of rural is bright, but you know what? We have a choice. We can be those unicorns, and we can make this great. So get out your pens and paper, just like students in a great classroom would do. If you're feeling a little lonely at your table, I would ask you to join another table so you can have some conversation around this. Get to know each other. This is what it's about. So find somebody you may not even have met yet, and we're gonna have a little bit of homework. And we're going to get some information from you. This is a great group that we can really gather some great information from. It's already starting great.
Yeah, we got it. Collaboration now.
We're back, and we're back. I think we're back. Okay, we're back. So I know there's great conversation going on right now, which is wonderful, and I don't want to interrupt that too much. But we do want some brave souls, and I have Greg there in the back of the room who has found one, to give some answers and insight to what your table has found on the first question. Why is rural important? Greg, I'm going to hand it over to you there.
Yeah, we've got this group here. They came up with some great things. Maybe some things they're not going to share because it might not be politically correct. But they did come up with some other things that they're going to share, so I'm going to pass it over to Craig here.
All right. So we talked about why rural is important, that it's really the base fabric of the country, that it's where we produce grounded leaders, and that those leaders are the future of our nation, that we also are the provider of food and water and natural resources. Do you want me to do the other ones too, or just the first one?
Yeah, we can do the other one.
So how can we collectively create a positive movement, really reinforce the importance of food security and the role we play in that, and create communities of place? And how will you make a difference to be a positive voice for these things that we think are important?
Okay.
Great, thank you, Craig. Let's give that table a round of applause. All right, I have someone. Kurt up here is very eager to share. Thank you, I know, I'm so surprised.
We had a really good discussion, and we heard some of this this morning about exports and ag, and we know our biggest export may be ag or crop related, but we feel our most important and saddest export is our youth. So many youth will leave the rural community, come to the university, but where do they go when they leave here? Kansas City, or they'll stay in Lincoln or Omaha. They won't go back home. So we need to figure out ways to get them home, and we've come up with some real good strategies for that. So,
Great, thank you, Kurt. Let's give them a round of applause as well. Nice job. All right, who's gonna be as eager as Kurt in providing some answers? You know, what did your table come up with? What brainstorm information do you have to share? I may pick on you over here. I will pick on other people. I've done this before. So don't be quiet. They were having some pretty intense discussion, our poster winning table over here. So let's hear from them.
Should have raised your hand.
First question, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of ideas that we discussed. The first one, in general, why is rural important? Well, it's not urban. That's the first distinction we made. And also the idea that rural areas, not just rural communities, provide valuable ecosystem services that without them can really be a potential threat to public health for at the global level as well as the national and state levels. It doesn't matter what kind of scale you're looking at. Another issue we talked about was this idea of place attachment, that a lot of rural communities still provide psychological health to individuals who live within them, and that's really important, that if you take certain individuals and place them into urban environments, it could potentially be disruptive to psychological health too. And then another one we also briefly discussed was this idea that there's almost seems like there's more natural resources, whether that be quality or quantity in terms of food, fiber, and water.
Great, thank you. Let's give them a round of applause for all that great thinking there. All right, let's have one more table share why rural.
Okay, we had a discussion of why rural matters, and I guess we were discussing the fact that Nebraska's rural, and that's what we have going for us, and everything evolves around rural. The governor mentioned many things, including the fact that our economy revolves around rural. Collectively, I think it's up to us in the room to go back home and find those individuals within the communities that can make this happen, because as outsiders, even if we've been away from our hometown for a few years, it needs to happen from within, and we need to generate that. And maybe they weren't able to be at this conference, so we need to excite them so they can get their community behind themselves. And I think that's the key, is find the leadership within the community to get excited about what you want to do to invigorate your community and to make it grow. And it's up to us to maybe make that happen.
Great. Thank you, Craig. Awesome. Give him a round of applause. That was great. And I know some of you have spoken to this already. How can we collectively create a positive movement for rural? Who else would like to share on this question? How do we do this? How do we stay together after this? What are some resources we can use?
Well, as we were discussing this question, I think it really focused in on leadership at the community level. When you heard Howard Buffett talking about you really can't come up with one solution that's going to apply everywhere, I think that's very true. And what we talked about as perhaps what we can do in this regard to collectively create a movement is simply provide support and resources to help communities build the leadership within that's going to lead to that positive change.
Great, thank you, Rod. Who else? Who else like to share in question 2? All right, Alyssa, over here. Saw a lot of writing over here at this table as well.
It was a lot of writing because I'm an external processor, but we were talking about just like challenging, going off of that, challenging the dichotomies of local, global, rural, urban, and just like really, bridging those dichotomies that we tend to like place and categorize people in. And then just like really getting into connecting, having, like getting people to connect with that rural piece of their cultural identity. Because really like rural is so connected to everybody, especially in Nebraska and even in urban areas where there is like the food chain and everything else like really stems from rural. So just really, going beyond the dichotomies with that.
Great, thank you, Alyssa. One more person on that question. How can we collectively create a positive movement for rural?
So sometimes we discovered that people move to our communities for reasons of family. They maybe they find a person that they would like to build their life with, and they come to these communities. And we're trying to find a way that we can identify those opportunities. So we're going to have a left-handed oath. Find people who might be staying in the community longer. No, that's kind of funny. But one of the things I know that I really took to heart is that this conference needs to go home with me, with you, with all of us. And I want to bring that. I can't begin to speak to all of these topics to all my folks at home. How do we take this, and we took it to Curtis this year. I want to take it to Chadron. I want it in Scottsbluff. I want it in Alliance. I want it. And all of us are going to have to do that. So my challenge is, let's do this locally next year.
Thank you, Jenny. Give her a round of applause. That was great. Thank you. And that segues us wonderfully. I could have planted you better there, Jenny, into our last question. How will you make a difference? And we'll get some collective responses on this as well, but I actually want you to turn to the person sitting next to you and tell each other, how do you plan to make a difference? Because if we speak it, if we get it out, we're more likely to do it. I know that. So I just want you to turn to that person next to you and make a commitment to make a difference.
Okay, so did everybody make their pledge with their left-hand pledge? Turn to your neighbor and make your left-hand pledge. So how will you make a difference? We are going to just kind of close up before the video. So I hope you all go out and you find your nice unicorn and you really cast your stone and make your ripple of hope happen. In the city of Neligh, we are absolutely astounded at some of the projects that we have going on. I wanted to leave you on a positive note with Neligh since I shared my story, but we are a community that's really rallying around this change movement. Right now we've got about $13 million in projects that are happening that could create about 110 jobs, we're estimating, and retain 84 positions in Neligh. And we are doing that at a community level, and it really starts with, there was a group of 5 individuals in Neligh that really started this change movement. So when we talk about creating a movement of hope, it actually started with 5 individuals who about 4 years ago looked at our downtown and said, we need to do something. We need to get out there and we need to do something. They called themselves the Neligh Growth Group, or the Grow Neligh Group. And these 5 individuals started this movement that then led to passage of some sales tax that we've reallocated for economic development. And they have snowballed now into, we've had at least 150 volunteers that have helped with economic development, working on some amazing projects. So you can be change, you know, just like what Sean talked about yesterday, but it all does start with you.
Thank you,